Now, marking a quarter century since the fall of the Berlin Wall, the world is balancing on the brink of a new Cold War. That's a warning from former Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev, a man who played a key role in lifting the divide between East and West. He was speaking in Berlin at commemorations for the fallen wall. RT's Peter Oliver has more on what Gorbachev had to say about the old divides.
Mikhail Gorbachev was addressing an audience just pretty close to where I am, near the Brandenburg Gate. He was full of praise for all of the work done by leaders in bringing down the Berlin Wall and bringing it down peacefully. He said that history will give high marks to political leaders active at this time. However, his attention then turned to modern-day problems, and he said that the root of all of the major issues in the world went back to the 1990s, and was particularly critical of the role of NATO and the United States.
Euphoria and triumphalism hit the heads of Western leaders. Taking advantage of Russia's weakness and a lack of a counterweight, they claimed a monopoly on leadership and domination in the world. I'll name just a few examples: the expansion of NATO, Yugoslavia, Kosovo, missile defense plans, Iraq, Libya, Syria.
However, he did say that there was a glimmer of hope, that the 80s had taught us one thing. It was that through dialogue things can be sorted out. He said he was convinced that Russian President Vladimir Putin wanted to see new dialogue and new relationships with the West.
I want to urge you, political and government leaders, to consider Vladimir Putin's recent statement at the Valdai Forum. Despite all his harsh criticism of the West, and especially the US, I saw in his speech a desire to find ways to ease tensions and create new ground for dialogue.
Well, as the 25th anniversary celebrations continue here in Berlin, it's worth looking at just how much the wall shaped the modern city. So I took a little walk around the town and looked at how it looked then and how it looks now. 3 meters high, and at its peak, cutting a 160-kilometer swathe through the German capital, the Berlin Wall may be gone, but the effects that it had on shaping the modern city can be visible throughout the town. I'm stood right at the very heartland of German politics in today's world, but back in the 1980s, well, this was a desolate wasteland right on the very frontier. Join me as we look throughout the rest of the city to see the effects and the changes of 25 years since the wall came down. Well, this is Potsdamer Platz, slap bang in the centre of Berlin. The wall itself came just through here, and you can see West Berliners climbing up viewing gantries to be able to get a glimpse of the east. Now, for some, in some parts of the city, this was the only opportunity to be able to see loved ones or friends that had been cut off when the wall came through. But for many, it was just the novelty of being able to look beyond the Iron Curtain into the east. Flash forward to right now, though, and it's a very different Potsdamer Platz we see today. A Potsdamer Platz that's a centre for bars, for hotels, restaurants, and the biggest cinema in the centre of town. It's not just in terms of bricks and mortar that the Berlin Wall shaped this city. Government statistics directly attribute 136 deaths to the Berlin Wall, the first of which took place here on Bernaustrasse in 1961, when a 58-year-old woman leapt from a 4th-story window trying to escape to the west. She was just one of many that tried and failed to make that type of crossing. Here in today's Berlin, though, that street has been demolished, and where the wall stood is a park that has become a memorial to all of those who tried, and in some cases those who failed, to flee a divided Berlin, to make sure that those in today's united city don't forget the events of 1961 to 1989. Peter Oliver, RT, Berlin.
Well, as for Moscow's role in bridging the European divide, it was more clever and wiser than the German leaders. That's according to a former aide to Helmut Kohl, the German Chancellor, during reunification.
The leadership of the Communist Party in Moscow was much more open, much smarter in reacting on the political questions of the time than the German government. And as far as I remember, Helmut Kohl said even 1988, the German reunification is not on the agenda of world history. And just 11 months later it was.
The fall of the Berlin Wall is one of history's greatest symbols of freedom and unity. Ceremonies marking its collapse are being held right across the city. Right now in Berlin, where barbed wire and watchtowers once stood, there are thousands of glowing balloons recreating the wall. The light installation stretches for 15 kilometres through the city, retracing the former border between east and west. It was put up last night, but on Sunday, volunteers will release those balloons into the sky, attaching personal notes to their strings.